So Nicola Williams qualified and practiced as a barrister. She's worked in the UK and abroad and is now a part-time Crown Court judge and the former Ombudsman for the UK Armed Forces. Her debut novel, Without Prejudice, was first published in 1997, but it's just been republished by Penguin on 4th of February 2021. She will be reading from her work in progress, The Advocate's Devil. Please welcome Nicola.
Well, good evening, everybody. First of all, my internet connection is a little unstable, so I'm just going to keep pressing on, and I hope that people can hear me, but I will just keep going anyway. A little introduction before I start reading. It's actually a midpoint chapter. One thing that's got in common with Amanda's work is that the bit that I'm going to read is the antagonist in the chapter, who's a really nasty piece of work. And his name is Lambert. He is a bigoted, passed over for promotion police officer based at Miller Street Police Station. And the genesis of this book is that question that people always ask you at dinner parties. How can you represent someone, not who, how can you represent someone who you think is guilty, but how can you represent someone who's a really nasty piece of work, accused of a really heinous crime, but there's a slight possibility that they didn't do it. And so Lambert is accused of killing, or rather very seriously injuring a young black youngster. Someone described it as Stephen Lawrence with cops. The young man isn't dead yet, but he wants my alter ego, Lee Mitchell, to represent him. So this central character is at a midpoint where he's having a discussion with somebody that knows another person that's died. I hope this will all make sense once I've read it. Okay, this is chapter 16. Flowerfields Estate. It was as unlike its name as it was possible to imagine. The town planners must have been on crack when they named it. No doubt it was intended to be inspiring, but in fact it was a sick joke on the beleaguered residents living there. But there were children playing outside today. That was unusual, even in broad daylight during half term, as very few parents thought it safe enough to let them out. But it struck a nice normal note. Kids playing hide and seek, laughing and yelling and giggling as children should. It was hard to pinpoint exactly when in the game childish yells turned into anguished screams. But when their mothers rushed over, the cause was clear. Jimmy Thomas, slumped under a stairwell hardly anyone used, blonde hair plastered to the side of his face, matted with dried blood. His skull had been pierced by a single bullet hole to the temple, his mouth stuffed full of wraps of crack cocaine. And by someone who knew that no one would dare touch those drugs, clearly left to send a message, even around here. It was the perfect hiding place for a child or for a body. Canteen coffee, shit as ever. Lambert had been determined to report for duty as usual, but as he sat and stared at the others on their mid-afternoon break, it seemed the only person at Miller Street who wasn't shocked to see him there was himself. He knew by now people would have heard about Monday, so he wasn't surprised that people were treating him like a leper. It might have been his imagination, of course. He hadn't been Mr. Popularity for a long time. The few he knew and liked had moved on or up or out, and he had no time for the bunch of snowflakes coming out of Hendon now, making the station look all culturally sensitive and woke. Just then the tannoy crackled into life. Would Sergeant Lambert please go to the super's office at once? Lambert's head jerked up to see all eyes on him. He scraped his chair noisily back along the floor and heaved himself to his feet. As he did so, his gut popped a button on his shirt, exposing 4 inches of hairy, pallid belly. Great. He grabbed his uniform jacket and buttoned it up on the way to Superintendent Reed's office. So I'm fast forwarding to the next section. Lambert checked his watch as he left Reed's office. He knew someone who would know what happened to JT and why. If he left now, it would look suspicious. 4 more hours until he could knock off and go looking for him. The match was on. After a year of using this pub, Ray Willis was getting used to it. He didn't think he could ever love it or even like it, but he was getting used to it. He looked round from the shabby corner which had become his usual spot. If ever there was such a thing as a Mockney pub, this was it. It was dark, posh, and faux down at heel. It was the kind of place that would pride itself on its diversity, even though it clearly wasn't. Still, he supposed he counted now. It was less than a mile away from what used to be his local, but the two places were so different they could be on opposite sides of London. His old boozer used to smell of hand-rolled cigarettes and draft beer, had a motherly barmaid who knew how to pull a pint of real Guinness, and a pop star wannabe who didn't. He'd been going there ever since he could drink legally, which was 2 years after he'd started drinking at all. He missed his old place, heard on the grapevine that people were still asking after him, even after all this time. He was sure that some of them thought he'd be back, just walk in like nothing had changed. But that wasn't going to happen, as too much had. He couldn't stand to see the pitying looks of friends or the frightened ones of children, or from people who didn't know him or know what had happened to him. He didn't have that history with the people here. In fact, he had chosen this place for just that reason. In spite of their relative proximity, no one in his old place would ever be caught dead here. Besides, he liked them being a bit afraid of him here. That meant they left him alone, for starters. He suspected that he added just the right amount of gritty, working-class authenticity for them, so long as he stayed in the corner, at a distance, in the dark. So they both benefited. He was rolling a cigarette when he heard a beer bottle plunked down on the long wooden table right in front of him. Piss off, said, not looking up. So it is you, then. Ray looked up so quickly he forgot to angle his head as he usually would. Ray Willis, in a place like this, Lambert said, sitting down and shaking his head in disbelief. Never trust a place where they don't serve beer on tap, only this bottled shite. He looked over at Ray's pint, or Guinness, and I hate that. Who asked you to sit down? I said, piss off. What are you still doing here? Well, I thought I'd come and join you and all your friends, Lambert sneered, looking down at the long trestle table at which they both sat, empty except for the two of them. It's busy here tonight. Can't think why. But no one's coming near you. Why is that, Ray? Lambert took a swig of beer, then grimaced with disgust. Bet they love having you here. You look a proper South London villain, especially with a face like that. Ray felt himself flinching. Oh, don't mind me. I've seen worse, but not much. Seeing Ray's right arm twitch, Lambert added in the same conversational tone, and don't bother trying to punch me out. I thought you were trying to avoid attention these days. Ray glanced over Lambert's shoulder and saw half a dozen people pretending not to look at them, the two men who were already so clearly out of place. So let's go outside so I can knock you spark out for speaking to me like that. Oh, you're not going to do that, Ray. For the first time in a long while, I can't nick you for anything, but I could for that. You're going straight at the moment, I hear, working for Trojan Security, doing clubs. That's how I managed to track you down. Took some effort, though. You know how people don't want to talk to the old Bill, especially me. Yeah, Ray said. I heard you got pulled in for that shooting. Anyone else would have been nicked already. Lambert didn't even bother to ask how he knew. Don't worry, I'm sure that's coming. And if I end up on remand, I'll probably be dead. You know how many people on remand would be waiting to stick it to me? Lambert made a stabbing gesture with his hand. Stick it to me the other way too, if enough of them caught me in the showers. Anyway, the boy's not dead yet, and I didn't do it. So what do you want with me then? You heard about JT then. It was a statement of fact rather than a question. Ray Willis hadn't been going straight that long. Even this early, he would know. Yeah, Ray looked away. He was always the runt of the litter. Thought he was hard, but petty thieving was his level. He wasn't cut out for drugs. His face hardened. Or, to be a grass, you're probably the reason he's dead. Anyway, you know I know him. So you two used to be tight. You were virtually the only white boys in Peckham until you became Mr. Wigger, hanging out with all these blacks, liking your women that way too. Better watch out it doesn't rub off. Dick first. Ray's temper was legendary and he had the criminal record to prove it, but apparently something else had changed as well as his face. If Lambert thought he was going to get a rise out of him, he was mistaken. Even though half my face is chewed up, I still get more pussy than you. When was the last time you fucked anything other than your hand? As Lambert's face flushed, Ray continued, that long. So, let's stick to talking about JT. No, I don't know who killed him, and you'd be the last person I'd tell if I did. He drained his pint. Tell you what, though, the police better find out who did it before I do. Why are you so bothered? Because he didn't deserve to be shot and left to die in his own piss, not even him. Anything else? Well, after spending all this time tracking you down, I thought I'd drop by and tell you your girlfriend is going to be my new brief. At Ray's puzzled look, Lambert added, you know, the black one always acted for you. Did that Eurotrash rich Jew boy or Martian? I know who you mean, Ray interrupted. Do I look like I give a shit either way? Anyway, never going to happen. I've got her mate, that mixed solicitor. He'll talk her around. You better check your sources. They're not friends anymore, not since the bust up after that. Well, it's either that or she gets disbarred. I do know a bit about the law, you know. Yeah, enough so that you could shoot that kid or have him shot and no one would know it was you. I know you nicked his brother plenty of times. Isn't that what they call a motive, seeing as you know so much about the law? Ray knew from the expression in Lambert's eyes of what he had said had hit home. Although he didn't raise his voice when he replied, his tone was menacing. What's the matter? Oh, I know. If you could find one, you'd probably have her picture on your wall or wanking off to it in your lap. You defending her honor, her integrity? He spoke the last as if it were a dirty word. You think she's too good to represent me, is that it? I've never met a barrister yet who wouldn't flog their own mother, literally, for a good case. You know, I always thought you fancied her. Think she'd ever look at you now? Especially now. Lambert leaned forward, his voice softer now. You better have a whole face before you speak to me like that again, Sonny. Ray leapt out of his seat and pulled his right arm back, his hand balled into a fist. Lambert ducked. It was only the sound of his bottle and Ray's glass smashing on the stone floor that brought him back to his senses. He stopped and saw that everyone was looking at the tableau he and Lambert made in the corner. Lambert straightened up, grinned, patted Ray on his shoulder and spoke to the onlookers. Very passionate about his football, my mate. He turned back to Ray and continued, his voice lower this time. Nah, we shouldn't be fighting, Ray. We white English got to stick together. Looks like you might have to find yourself another boozer, though, just when you were making yourself so at home here. Lambert grinned broadly, as if they were best mates. Be seeing you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I've already got some comments. Very smooth and flowing, jargon that is correct, language and thinking that is relevant, and the beer on tap line so authentic, I nearly smiled too hard. That's from Noel. Lots of atmosphere, Carolyn Beckenham, very scary right before bedtime from Laurel. Splendidly evocative of London's underworld, that's from John's Byrant. Great title from Carolyn. Carolyn again, lots of atmosphere. Kate Birch, menacing is right. Semra, smooth and flowing. Can't wait. Nicola from Sunny. And Sunny again, I so need to read this novel ASAP. Tim McNally, really looking forward to reading this book. So wonderful thumbs up, Nicola. So thank you. And now, and at your one of your when your book with that Prejudice was republished, it was endorsed by Bernadine Evaristo, isn't that right? I think that's how Kate introduced you to me.
Yes.
So great, and great that that's back out, and you've got a new one coming out soon after. So that's really good news. Well done. So good to hear authentic from Jeff. I can see the TV series already from Chris Schuler.
That'd be great.
So excellent. Really well. Thank you, everyone. Just a couple of final things. Thank you to all our readers.